It's great to have everyone here. And I will start sharing my screen. All right, today we are on chapter 9, section 4, the Holy Spirit's plan of forgiveness. At-one-ment is for all because it is the way to undo the belief that anything is for you alone. To forgive is to overlook. Look then beyond error and do not let your perception rest upon it, for you will believe what your perception holds. Accept as true only what your brother is, if you would know yourself. Perceive what he is not, and you cannot know what you are, because you see him falsely. Remember always that your identity is shared, and that its sharing is its reality. If you have a part to play in the at-one-ment, but the plan of the at-one-ment is beyond you, oh, I'm sorry, you have a part to play in the at-one-ment, but the plan of the at-one-ment is beyond you. You do not understand how to overlook errors, or you would not make them. It would merely be further error to believe either that you do not make them, or that you can correct them without a guide to correction. And if you do not follow this guide, your errors will not be corrected. The plan is not yours because of your limited ideas about what you are. This sense of limitation is where all errors arise. The way to undo them, therefore, is not of you, but for you. At-one-ment is a lesson in sharing, which is given you because you have forgotten how to do it. The Holy Spirit merely reminds you of the natural use of your abilities. By reinterpreting the ability to attack into the ability to share, he translates what you have made into what God created. If you would accomplish this through him, you cannot look on your abilities through the eyes of the ego, or you will judge them as it does. All their harmfulness lies in the ego's judgment. All their helpfulness lies in the judgment of the Holy Spirit. The ego, too, has a plan of forgiveness because you are asking for one, though not of the right teacher. The ego's plan, of course, makes no sense and will not work. By following its plan, you will merely place yourself in an impossible situation, to which the ego always leads you. The ego's plan is to have you see error clearly first, and then overlook it. Yet, how can you overlook what you have made real? By seeing it clearly, you have made it real and cannot overlook it. This is where the ego is forced to appeal to mysteries, insisting that you must accept the meaningless to save yourself. Many have tried to do this in my name, forgetting that my words make perfect sense because they come from God. They are as sensible now as they ever were, because they speak of ideas that are eternal. Forgiveness that is learned of me does not use fear to undo fear, nor does it make real the unreal and then destroy it. Forgiveness through the Holy Spirit lies simply in looking beyond error from the beginning, and thus keeping it unreal for you. Do not let any belief in its realness enter your mind, or you will also believe that you must undo what you have made in order to be forgiven. What has no effect does not exist. And to the Holy Spirit, the effects of error are non-existent. By steadily and consistently canceling out all its effects everywhere and in all respects, he teaches that the ego does not exist and proves it. Follow the Holy Spirit's teaching in forgiveness then, because forgiveness is his function and he knows how to fulfill it perfectly. That is what I meant when I said that miracles are natural. And when they do not occur, something has gone wrong. Miracles are merely the sign of your willingness to follow the Holy Spirit's plan of salvation, recognizing that you do not understand what it is. His work is not your function. And unless you accept this, you cannot learn what your function is. The confusion of functions is so typical of the ego that you should be quite familiar with it by now. The ego believes that all functions belong to it, even though it has no idea what they are. This is more than mere confusion. It is a particularly dangerous combination of grandiosity and confusion that makes the ego likely to attack anyone and anything for no reason at all. This is exactly what the ego does. It is unpredictable in its responses because it has no idea of what it perceives. If you have no idea what is happening, how appropriately can you expect to react? You might ask yourself, regardless of how you may account for the reaction, whether its unpredictability places the ego in a sound position as your guide. Let me repeat that the ego's qualifications as a guide are singularly unfortunate, and that it is a remarkably poor choice as a teacher of salvation. Anyone who elects a totally insane guide must be totally insane himself. Nor is it true that you do not realize the guide is insane. You realize it because I realize it, and you have judged it by the same standard I have. The ego literally lives on borrowed time, and its days are numbered. Do not fear the last judgment, but welcome it. And do not wait, for the ego's time is borrowed from your eternity. This is the second coming that was made for you as the first was created. The second coming is merely the return of sense. Can this possibly be fearful? What can be fearful but fantasy? And who turns to fantasy unless he despairs of finding satisfaction in reality? Yet it is certain that you will never find satisfaction in fantasy, so that your only hope is to change your mind about reality. Only if the decision that reality is fearful is wrong can God be right. And I assure you that God is right. Be glad then that you have been wrong, but this was only because you did not know who you were. Had you known, you could no more have been wrong than God can. The impossible can happen only in fantasy. When you search for reality in fantasies, you will not find it. The symbols of fantasy are of the ego, and of these you will find many. But do not look for meaning in them. They have no more meaning than the fantasies into which they are woven. Fairy tales can be pleasant or fearful, but no one calls them true. Children may believe them, and so, for a while, the tales are true for them. Yet when reality dawns, the fantasies are gone. Reality has not gone in the meanwhile. The second coming is the awareness of reality, not its return. Behold, my child, reality is here. It belongs to you and me and God, and it is perfectly satisfying to all of us. Only this awareness heals, because it is the awareness of truth. It kind of ties into what we were saying with what Mary had shared earlier, when she dipped her toe in the unreal for a moment.
Yeah, that I thought of, I got a diagnosis couple months ago. I tell you, I haven't thought about it. So it's almost, but at the time, oh, I know there's a lump in my kidney. I even forget. I don't think about it. And but it's not life threatening. It could be removed. It needs to be. But in my mind, it's not there anymore. I don't think about it. I will be so shocked. They said you can wait like 4 months and have another ultrasound and see what's happening. And I'll do that. But boy, I wouldn't have thought about it if Mary hadn't brought up what was going on with her. And
Right.
so, and it doesn't, it doesn't really change what's happening with me, but I guess I'm not afraid. I can say that. I'm not afraid.
Hmm.
Yeah, it might still be there, but I kind of have a feeling it'll be benign, even though they assume it's not. But why not? Why not assume it's benign?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think it's interesting too, because so many times we think we are our body. And it's interesting to be able to let go of that and say, no, we're not our body. Our body is just
Right.
a vehicle that
Right.
houses our operating system, right? And if we can let go of the fear that sometimes gets intermeshed into the bloodstream, right? We can let that go and just let the body heal itself. And connect with that source of love, right? And allow that to be our guiding force. And like Mary said, it's whatever it's supposed to be or meant to be, it's going to be. And there's no point in worrying about it or it's all for our highest good.
That's my go-to. I am not a body. I am free. I am as God created me. It really brings me a lot of comfort
Yeah,
from just having said it a lot. And I think there are some people that even course students that don't like that I'm not a body. And I can say that. I say that it's not hard for me to say that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it goes back to like we forgot who we are. We forgot what we are, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't even focus on what I'm not. I focus on
Mm-hmm.
what I am, who I
Yeah.
am.
Yeah.
I
That's
Yes.
don't
good.
push away from anything because our bodies are valuable tools. If we
Sure.
acknowledge that we are the ones using the tool is not defining us. And we
Right.
seem to do that a lot in duality. I'm noticing how much words and meanings of words as symbols enslave us, trap us.
Mm-hmm.
And when we remember, we're the ones that, created the words and their meanings and their uses in the first place, then we can think of another word that reflects our intention or our vision for something, rather than saying, oh, I can't do this because that word means blank.
Right.
It's
Yep.
we we
Exactly.
become we're back in the driver's seat, and
Yeah.
when we're not intense on we're the only thing that's driving, we then commune and we go through the world. The thing about God is very, very pleasant, very enjoyable. And that's how we then can experience life, when we let go of that micromanagement or that helpless
Right.
piece that we like to engender in being separated. So, the body is wonderful, but we are not, again, slaves to it. We are so much more as spirits. So I always see myself as being this hugely connected thing,
Mm-hmm.
rather than fighting to be out of the body. I'm not fighting to be out of it. It's you know, just there, but I'm much bigger. It's a part of me versus me being it.
It's so funny. I just got the vision of the movie Avatar. When the guy goes into the Avatar suit, but the Avatar is just this suit that's in this glob of water, right? And when the guy like puts his mind into the suit, then the suit's animated, right? So it's, I just got that vision when you were saying that, Mary. All right, shall we continue? Keep going. The unhealed healer. The ego's plan for forgiveness is far more widely used than God's. This is because it is undertaken by unhealed healers and is therefore of the ego. Let us consider the unhealed healer more carefully now. By definition, he's trying to give what he has not received. If an unhealed healer is a theologian, for example, he may begin with the premise, I am a miserable sinner and so are you. If he is a psychotherapist, he's more likely to start with the equally incredible belief that attack is real for both himself and the patient, and that it does not matter for either of them. I repeatedly said that beliefs of the ego cannot be shared, and this is why they are unreal. How then can uncovering them make them real? Every healer who searches fantasies for truth must be unhealed, because he does not know where to look for truth, and therefore does not have the answer to the problem of healing. There is an advantage to bringing nightmares into awareness, but only to teach that they're not real and that anything they contain is meaningless. The unhealed healer cannot do this because he does not believe it. All unhealed healers follow the ego's plan for forgiveness in one form or another. If they are theologians, they're likely to condemn themselves, teach condemnation, and advocate a fearful solution. Projecting condemnation onto God, they make him appear retaliative and fear his retribution. What they have done is merely to identify with the ego, and by perceiving what it does, condemn themselves because of this confusion. It is understandable that there have been revolts against this concept, but to revolt against it is still to believe in it. Some newer forms of the ego's plan are as helpful as the older ones, because form does not matter and the content has not changed. In one of the newer forms, for example, a psychotherapist may interpret the ego's symbols in a nightmare and then use them to prove that the nightmare is real. Having made it real, he then attempts to dispel its effects by depreciating the importance of the dreamer. This would be a healing approach if the dreamer were also identified as unreal. Yet if the dreamer is equated with the mind's corrective power through the Holy Spirit is denied. This is a contradiction, even in the ego's terms, and one which it usually notes, even in its confusion. If the way to counteract fear is to reduce the importance of the mind, how can this build ego strength? Such evident inconsistencies account for why no one has really explained what happens in psychotherapy. Nothing really does. Nothing real has happened to the unhealed healer, and he must learn from his own teaching. His ego will always seek to get something from the situation. The unhealed healer, therefore, does not know how to give and consequently cannot share. He cannot correct because he is not working correctively. He believes that it's up to him to teach the patient what is real, although he does not know it himself. What then should happen? When God said, "Let there be light," there was light. Can you find light by analyzing darkness, as the psychotherapist does? Or like the theologian, by acknowledging darkness in yourself and looking for a distant light to remove it while emphasizing the distance? Healing is not mysterious. Nothing will change unless it's understood, since light is understanding. A miserable sinner cannot be healed without magic, nor can an unimportant mind esteem itself without magic. Both forms of the ego's approach, then, must arrive at an impasse, the characteristic impossible situation to which the ego always leads. It may help someone to point out where he is heading, but the point is lost unless he is also helped to change his direction. The unhealed healer cannot do this for him, since he cannot do it for himself. The only meaningful contribution the healer can make is to present an example of one whose direction has been changed for him, and who no longer believes in nightmares of any kind. The light in his mind will therefore answer the questioner, who must decide with God that there is light because he sees it. And by his acknowledgement, the healer knows it is there. That is how perception ultimately is translated into knowledge. The miracle worker begins by perceiving light and translates his perception into sureness by continually extending it and accepting its acknowledgement. Its effects assure him it is there. A therapist does not heal. He lets healing be. He can point to darkness, but he cannot bring light of himself, for light is not of him. Yet, being for him, it must also be for his patient. The Holy Spirit is the only therapist. He makes healing clear in any situation in which he is the guide. You can only let him fulfill his function. He needs no help for this. He will tell you exactly what to do to help anyone he sends to you for help, and he will speak through you if you do not interfere. Remember that you choose the guide for helping, and the wrong choice will not help. But remember also that the right one will. Trust him, for help is his function, and he is of God. As you awaken other minds to the Holy Spirit through him, and not yourself, you will understand that you are not obeying the laws of this world, but the laws you are obeying work. The good is what works, is a sound, though insufficient statement. Only the good can work. Nothing else works at all. This course offers a very direct and very simple learning situation and provides the guide who tells you what to do. If you do it, you will see that it works. Its results are more convincing than its words. They will convince you that the words are true. By following the right guide, you will learn the simplest of all lessons. By their fruits ye shall know them, and they shall know themselves. I love that last line. They shall know themselves. That's so good. Right? How many times do we forget to ask the Holy Spirit? It's like, I can do it. I can fix it. I can get through this. And it's simple. It's right there for all of us. Just ask and allow it to come through you, receive it. But the ego wants to fix. It wants to do, it wants to convince you that it knows the answer, right? It's the one that speaks first and the loudest. But you have to quiet that. Go inside and ask of the one who knows. Ask of the one who has the only answer.
A helpful way to do that, it was yesterday's lesson. I'm trying to remember what it was. I start January 1st. Oh, my mind is part of God's. I'm very holy. In the exercise, he asks us to, just watch our mind and see ourselves in certain situations, and then notice how we describe ourselves in that situation. If I feel, I don't, something that came up for me a couple of times was I feel put upon. And but I'm very holy. My mind is part of God. So it doesn't matter. Or if I felt good about myself, same difference. There's no difference.
Right.
It's all equally unreal. It doesn't really get to the heart of who we really are. I'm kind of losing my train of thought, but you were saying to get to that place, there are exercises we can go through to learn how to notice.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And you're right. And the lessons are so important, right? And so many times we just don't do them because, I did them last year. I did them the year before. I don't need to do them again this year, right? When we do, we have to do them every day.
I do.
It's
I
the
do.
repetition.
Right. It's like exercising a muscle.
It is. It's like if you stop going to the gym, your body's not going to be in great shape. Or if not going to the gym necessarily, but if you stop exercising, if you stop doing the things that the body needs to be healthy, then the body was going to reflect that. You're right. Same with the mind. Because we're surrounded by the ego, constantly bombarded.
Right. And if I'm very holy, then so is everybody else. So there's no room for that criticism. And I think it kind of came up with what you were just talking about too. There's no room for that.
Right.
And I was just thinking about how when I, do spiritual counseling, do believe that God is working through me. And I think of those as like the spiritual gifts, the God gifts, that when you just allow that flow, God comes through you, and it just, it's just so synchronous, and the flow is so easy and so alive. Like the light that shines is just so vibrant and has, the white light has a whole spectrum of color. And you get that in accepting your God gifts and just letting them show themselves into the world without having to micromanage again and say, I'm going to manifest this and I'm going to handle that. Just sort of opening up and allowing.
Right. A place in my life where I can see that happening. I sing with the Threshold Choir. So we sing for people at their bedsides when they're dying or ill or when they ask us to. So it's a cappella, 3-part harmony, very quiet, just songs of comfort and support, not songs you'd recognize, songs written by Threshold members, so it doesn't trigger memories. But everybody, it creates this bubble of light when we're doing it, and draws everybody in, and everybody feels so honored to be there. And that's what I thought of what you were describing, Mary. I can tell when I'm in that flow, and that's a definite, always happens then.
That's beautiful, Pam. What a wonderful service.
Yes.
Yeah, and that whole thing of the choir reminds me of one of my clients the other day said, I don't want to lose myself. And I was trying to think, because again, the word loss brings up fear for us. So we talk about, surrendering, or I lose the little I in how we merge. And it's not really that. It's how we, willingly allow that to take place, like being part in a choir, like just lending our voice to the whole.
When you were saying that, Mary, I'm thinking, yeah, because you can't lose yourself, right? But you can remember yourself. And the self that you're afraid of losing is not yourself. It's not your real self. All right, any other discussion, or should we continue? That's fine. The acceptance of your brother. Can you become increasingly aware of the Holy Spirit in you, except by his effects? You cannot see him with your eyes, nor hear him with your ears. How then can you perceive him at all? If you inspire joy and others react to you with joy, even though you are not experiencing joy yourself, there must be something in you that is capable of producing it. If it is in you and can produce joy, and if you see that it does produce joy in others, you must be dissociating it in yourself. It seems to you that the Holy Spirit does not produce joy consistently in you, only because you do not consistently arouse joy in others. Their reactions to you are your evaluations of his consistency. When you are inconsistent, you will not always give rise to joy. And so you will not always recognize his consistency. What you offer to your brother, you offer to him, because he cannot go beyond your offering in his giving. This is not because he limits his giving, but simply because you have limited your receiving. The decision to receive is the decision to accept. If your brothers are part of you, will you accept them? Only they can teach you what you are, for your learning is the result of what you taught them. What you call upon in them, you call upon in yourself. And as you call upon it in them, it becomes real to you. God has but one Son, knowing them all as one. Only God himself is more than they, but they are not less than he is. Would you know what this means? If what you do to my brother, you do to me, and if you do everything for yourself because we are part of you, everything we do belongs to you as well. Everyone God created is part of you and shares his glory with you. His glory belongs to him, but it is equally yours. You cannot, then, be less glorious than he is. God is more than you only because he created you. But not even this would he keep from you. Therefore, you can create as he did, and your dissociation will not alter this. Neither God's light nor yours is dimmed because you do not see it. Because the sonship must create as one. You remember creation whenever you recognize part of creation. Each part you remember adds to your wholeness. because each part is whole. Wholeness is indivisible, but you cannot learn of your wholeness until you see it everywhere. You can know yourself only as God knows his Son, for knowledge is shared with God. When you awake in him, you will know your magnitude by accepting his limitlessness as yours. But meanwhile, you will judge it as you judge your brothers, and will accept it as you accept his. You are not yet awake, but you can learn how to awaken. Very simply, the Holy Spirit teaches you to awaken others. As you see them waken, you will learn what waking means. And because you have chosen to wake them, their gratitude and their appreciation of what you have given them will teach you its value. They will become the witnesses to your reality, as you are created witnesses to God's. Yet when the sonship comes together and accepts its oneness, it will be known by its creations, who witness to its reality as the Son does to the Father. Miracles have no place in eternity because they are reparative. Yet while you still need healing, your miracles are the only witnesses to your reality that you can recognize. You cannot perform a miracle for yourself because miracles are a way of giving acceptance and receiving it. In time, the giving comes first, though they are simultaneous in eternity, where they cannot be separated. When you have learned that they are the same, the need for time is over. Eternity is one time, its only dimension being always. This cannot mean anything to you until you remember God's open arms and finally know his open mind. Like him, you are always in his mind and with a mind like his. In your open mind are your creations in perfect communication, born of perfect understanding. Could you but accept one of them, you would not be wanting anything the world has to offer. Everything else would be totally meaningless. God's meaning is incomplete without you, and you are incomplete without your creations. Accept your brother in this world and accept nothing else, for in him you will find your creations, because he created them with you. You will never know that you are co-creator with God until you learn that your brother is co-creator with you. Bum, bum, bum. That was powerful. The acceptance of your brother. You have to learn that you are co-creator with your brother. And until then, you'll never know that you're co-creator with God. Gateway, right? Accepting your brother. Yeah, bring up any thoughts for anyone, any experiences you want to share?
It reminded me of with forgiveness, we can't find forgiveness of ourselves. We have to first forgive our brothers to find that, to forgive ourselves. So that kind of, we can't do it alone.
Right.
We're not alone. We need each other. We're each other's saviors.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
And our
love that.
selves, but it's recognizing that. And so we first, because we're trained to look outside then we, are in a sense just being taught how reciprocal it is. But we're going outside and including, accepting, and in that way forgiving our brothers, which also lets us know that we are in harmony with that. And therefore, we are forgiven, quote unquote, for that which we never did in the first place. But we're in harmony with then everything else. And so then we reflect that back out again. And then the cycle is complete and can freely flow in that circle.
And I know I've shared that forgiveness story with you guys many times. That relationship I had that was abusive in the body, but the forgiveness came through the healing dream and then came again in the flesh, which I thought was really interesting.
And also,
All
like,
minds are
we
trained.
can't really do anything that we're not the vibration of or the matched frequency of. So when we're forgiving our brother, we actually are in harmony with forgiveness within ourselves to begin with, because we're sending that out. And so it's simultaneous, if you will, but it's kind of affirms that, back to us. It gives us the quote unquote proof that we need in this world, that it's working, but it comes from
Right.
us to be.
Exactly. Anybody have any questions or thoughts or comments before we keep going? Okay. The two evaluations. God's will is your salvation. Would he not have given you the means to find it? If he wills you to have it, he must have made it possible and easy to obtain it. Your brothers are everywhere. You do not have to seek far for salvation. Every minute and every second gives you a chance to save yourself. Do not lose these chances, not because they will not return, but because delay of joy is needless. God wills you perfect happiness now. Is it possible that this is not also your will? And is it possible that this is not also the will of your brothers? Consider then that in this joint will, you're all united, and in this only. There may be disagreement on anything else, but not on this. This, then, is where peace abides. And you abide in peace when you so decide. Yet you cannot abide in peace unless you accept the at-one-ment, because the at-one-ment is the way to peace. The reason is very simple and so obvious that it is often overlooked. The ego is afraid of the obvious, since obviousness is the essential characteristic of reality. Yet you cannot overlook it unless you are not looking. It is perfectly obvious that if the Holy Spirit looks with love on all he perceives, he looks with love on you. His evaluation of you is based on his knowledge of what you are. And so he evaluates you truly. And this evaluation must be in your mind because he is. The ego is also in your mind because you have accepted it there. Its evaluation of you, however, is the exact opposite of the Holy Spirit's, because the ego does not love you. It is unaware of what you are and wholly mistrustful of everything it perceives because its perceptions are so shifting. The ego is therefore capable of suspiciousness at best and viciousness at worst. That is its range. It cannot exceed it because of its uncertainty, and it can never go beyond it because it can never be certain. You then have two conflicting evaluations of yourself in your mind, and they cannot both be true. You do not yet realize how completely different these evaluations are, because you do not understand how lofty the Holy Spirit's perception of you really is. He's not deceived by anything you do, because he never forgets what you are. The ego is deceived by everything you do, especially when you respond to the Holy Spirit, because at such times, its confusion increases. The ego is therefore particularly likely to attack you when you react lovingly, because it has evaluated you as unloving, and you are going against its judgment. The ego will attack your motives as soon as they become clearly out of accord with its perception of you. This is when it will shift abruptly from suspiciousness to viciousness, since its uncertainty is increased. Yet it is surely pointless to attack in return. What can this mean except that you're agreeing with the ego's evaluation of what you are? If you choose to see yourself as unloving, you will not be happy. You are condemning yourself and must therefore regard yourself as inadequate. Would you look to the ego to help you escape from a sense of inadequacy it has produced and must maintain for its existence? Can you escape from its evaluation of you by using its methods for keeping this picture intact? You cannot evaluate an insane belief system from within it. Its range precludes this. You can only go beyond it. Look back from a point where sanity exists and see the contrast. Only by this contrast can insanity be judged as insane. With the grandeur of God in you, you have chosen to be little and to lament your littleness. Within the system that dictated this choice, the lament is inevitable. Your littleness is taken for granted there, and you do not ask who granted it. The question is meaningless within the ego's thought system, because it would open the whole thought system to question. I have said that the ego does not know what a real question is. Lack of knowledge of any kind is always associated with unwillingness to know. And this produces a total lack of knowledge simply because knowledge is total. Not to question your littleness, therefore, is to deny all knowledge and keep the ego's whole thought system intact. You cannot retain part of a thought system because it can be questioned only at its foundation. And this must be questioned from beyond it, because within it, its foundation does stand. The Holy Spirit judges against the reality of the ego's thought system merely because he knows its foundation is not true. Therefore, nothing that arises from it means anything. He judges every belief you hold in terms of where it comes from. If it comes from God, he knows it to be true. If it does not, he knows that it's meaningless. Whenever you question your value, say, God himself is incomplete without me. Remember this when the ego speaks, and you will not hear it. The truth about you is so lofty that nothing unworthy of God is worthy of you. Choose then what you want in these terms, and accept nothing that you would not offer to God as wholly fitting for him. You do not want anything else. Return your part to him, and he will give you all of himself in exchange for the return of what belongs to him and renders him complete. Wow, that's so interesting. I just thought of the conversation we had with Carl earlier about Marianne Williamson, right? And her running and how she got so upset and was so upset with the people for not helping her and promoting her. And it's because she's in an insane thought system. She can't change it. She's not going to change it from within. She has to go outside of it, right? We all have to go outside of it to change it. You can't change an insane thought system from within the insane thought system.
I wonder how she looks at that.
I think like all of us, she probably is bombarded with the ego on a daily basis. And like we said, and you have to stay connected to the practice of asking the Holy Spirit again and again and again and again and again, right?
Yep.
I mean, I can't answer for her, although I am her technically, right? I am you and you are me and we are all one. So, I guess I can answer from that part that is one, just to say, can't make sense of an insane world. You can only go outside of it and affect change from aligning with the truth in who you are and what you are. Interesting.
I always feel like I'm grateful, though, for what any role anybody is playing. If they are trying to change it from within, it's like,
sure. Yeah. Yeah. But then to get upset about it, I guess that's where I'm thinking. She got upset about it. And at that moment, I think you're almost, it's kind of like, I call it the dunking pool, right? And I've said this, gosh, probably for 30 years. I think of it like when we're outside of it, we can see so clearly, right? We can see so clearly our alignment with who and what we are. But the people inside of it can't relate to us because they look at us like they're on a different plane. They're not part of my reality, right? So I feel like sometimes in order to connect with our brothers, we have to go into the dunking pool. We have to get into the muck of it, right? We have to get into the crap. And I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems to be the way it's happened in my life, right? You get into the crap and then you connect with your brother and then you pull him out. You see the truth in him and then the change is affected, right? I was having a conversation with my daughter when she was in college and she had come back to visit and we just weren't connecting at all. And, of course I've been doing Course in Miracles her whole life, and I was trying to explain to her about peace and Holy Spirit and blah, 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 blah. And she looked at me, she goes, "You're not even real. You're not even being real. I don't even know who you are." And I said, "Well, how would it feel for you? What would be the acknowledgement to you that I am real and that I'm not like on this like airy fairy, life is wonderful and I am love and I am light. Like how does it look to you for me to be real?" She's like, "Well, you need to be where I am and you need to like be down here and feel my pain and empathize with me and know what I'm going through." And I said, "Yeah, but to do that, I have to really I have to lower my energetic vibration and get into the muck of it, right?" And she said, "Well, that's what I want." And oh boy, did I get into the muck, and it wasn't pretty. And I said some things that were not very loving. And we both ended up connecting, and she ended up crying, and I ended up holding her in my arms and apologizing for being yucky, right? But she needed that. She needed to feel my connection. She just didn't feel like she was in touch with me. And also, it just reminded me of that book, The Little Soul in the Sun by Neil Donald Walsh. Have you ever read that?
Mm-mm.
Oh my gosh, it's such a good book. And I swear, every time I read that book, it brings me to tears because it's these two souls that are, light and love and pure, all pure Holy Spirit God, in that bubble of the one mind, right? And the one says, oh, I want to experience myself as this, and as gratitude. And the person says, oh, well, in order to do that, you have to be put in a situation where, someone in your life has got to do something to, like, something, or forgiveness. I want to feel like I'm for forgiveness. And they said, well, in order to do that, you're going to have to be put in a situation where someone's going to have to do something really awful and horrible to you so that you can learn how to forgive them. And so the other little soul who was with them said, I'll do that for you. I'll do that. But in order to do that, I have to make myself so heavy, and I have to make myself forget who I am. So you have to promise me that in that moment, when I'm doing this terrible thing to you and being awful, and I'm already like feeling teary-eyed through this because it's like such a replay of all of our relationships, right? When I'm in that moment of doing this horrible, awful thing, you have to remember who I am. So you can pull me out, so you can remind me that I'm light and I'm love and I am joy and I'm all these wonderful things. And so they made that agreement, to do that thing so that the one could experience forgiveness and the other one could be that horrible, awful person. And it's just so true. We see people as good and bad and right and wrong, when in essence, we're all perfect. We're all perfect creations of light and love. And we've just forgotten who we are and what we are. And it is our brothers, right? Our salvation. It is our brothers where we are able to see that truth in who we are and experience our light and our love by sharing it and seeing it in our brother and that horrible, awful thing that they've done, and be able to see them, see through that and see them who they are, see truly who they are through that act of, whatever it was, and see the light and the love in them and know them as that. And then we know ourselves as that, right? It's such an interesting paradox. So yeah, Neil Donald Walsh, The Little Soul in the Sun. It's usually out here on my bookshelf somewhere. It's one of my favorite books. I just love it so much.
Gonna look for that.
Yeah, it's really
I've
amazing.
read it for all my grandchildren, so
Oh,
that they're.
so good. So good, right, Mary?
Are you saying it's for children?
Oh yes, yeah.
Well,
It's a
you could say it's for children, but I think adults get just as much or more out of it because we've had all of those experiences. And we can think of it in our minds of like all the relationships and all the hardships and all of the terrible, awful things people have done to us or we have done to others, right?
Well,
Yeah.
I get more out of going to children's movies. I can't wait to take my grandchildren because I get more out of them than they do, between all the
Right?
stuff, humor and the experiences and the this and that. In fact, tonight I reinstated movie nights at the church, and we're seeing Soul, the Pixar movie tonight, and I
Oh,
just love.
fun.
It's so light and happy, and yet you can have a heck of a discussion around that movie.
I'll have to watch it. I haven't seen that one yet, but I remember when it came out, I wanted to see it. I haven't seen it yet. So thank you for reminding me of that, Mary. Awesome. Before we close, does anybody have anything they'd like to share? Last burning question or comment? Okay. as always, it's my pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for sharing in this. This is, it's amazing. I love being here with you guys. So thank you for sharing and talking and just being here on this journey.
Thank you, Terry.
All right, guys.
Thanks,
I will see you
Cynthia
next
and
week.
Mary.
All right.
Uh,
Bye.
Bye-bye.